Hey everybody, it's your boy, and well, today's video is going to be a very serious video, and that is, what do we do? Those of us on the right, those of us who are anti-woke, those of us who want to see the end of this authoritarian leftism that has spread across the West over the past couple of decades and now has seen itself firmly implanted within our societies. The type of ideology that is represented by people like Joe Biden, even right-wingers, for example, the current Conservative Party in the UK and other continental parties in Europe. Yes, we have seen mainstream right-wingers who you would assume would be aloof from such things, people who would be against such things, actively working with them. And in my last stream, I explained why that is, because a lot of these people, whether or not they know this, they follow an ideology that has its roots in Trotskyism, or rather former Trotskyites becoming conservatives and creating their own little sub-ideology within the right wing and conservatism mainly. A lot of these people probably don't know that they're ideologically similar to these people, and not just because their goals at the moment suggest that they should join forces when it comes to defeating populism. It goes a lot deeper than just that. But for those of us who are not like that, for those of us who may be populists, libertarians, classical liberals, social liberals even, those of you who are centre-left but not down with the whole woke business, what can we do? What can those of us who are not like that do in order to save Western civilization, hell, even the world? Because this type of stuff is not just affecting us, it's affecting everywhere, and it's being funded and spread across the world by countries like China. Well, this video is an attempt to answer some questions about that. It's not going to be a video that claims that these are the definite answers and this is what we should do. These are purely suggestions. But the main thing, which is of course the title of this video, is we need to change our mindset. We need to change not only how we approach things, but also how we think about things, because especially in America, and to some extent in Britain, possibly even continental Europe, there is a shockingly short-term way of thinking when it comes to not only winning elections, but getting political change from the right, which is funny because it's the right wing that usually criticise the left, especially leftist economists, of being too short-term in their thinking, too mid-term even. Yet, all I see from our side are people who are constantly talking about the next 4 years, the next 5 years, when they should be thinking about the next 25 years, the next 50 years, the next 75 years even, because that's what the left are doing. If you think they're just short-term thinking constantly all the time, you're wrong. Maybe in regards to the economy, yeah, I guess it's fair to assume you would think they're short-term in everything else, but of course, they're not. There's a reason why Marx had transitionary phases towards a stateless society, because he's thinking not just in terms of 50 years, he's thinking hundreds of years. Maybe not the rank and file, the idiots, but definitely the higher-ups. They're definitely thinking beyond their own lifetime. We need to adopt a strategic frame of mind, at least some of us, because there are some of us who may not have the ability or even the time to be thinking strategic all the time. Therefore, they're the people who should be enacting the strategic objectives on the tactical level. It's them who should be thinking about tactics. For those of us who perhaps don't have the temperament, maybe even the ability to go out there and get their hands dirty in the muddy business of politics, or even activism, or even advocacy. There are ways that they can do things without having to do that, and that is thinking strategically and coming up with ideas. And that's what we need to do. And how do you think strategically about a culture war? Well, first off, you have to think about what your society is made up of. We all know what our societies are made up of. And not only that, we need to think about what do we do with elections, because elections are part and parcel of political change, whether we like it or not. Not only do you have to think about how to get elected, you need to also think about who is going to be elected. Who do you want on the podium being announced as the winner? Who do you want as president? Who do you just want as your local councillor? This is the things you've got to think about, because the type of person that you are electing could be the answer between being saved from Marxism or being engulfed by it. Because at the moment, the reason why the Conservative Party and the Republican Party are the way they are is simply because people are voting in, they are choosing people who are spineless cowards, or have something to gain by working with the people who are meant to be their ideological opponents. You are voting them in, and I don't believe for a second that this is just the hand that you've been laid and you have to deal with it. There are people in your party, hundreds of them, who are waiting for the opportunity to have a career in politics and may actually be brave and may actually have the balls to do what is necessary to enact the political change that you want to see. So you need to actually promote those people. You need to put them in a position where they can actually become politicians. You need to be able to form networks and organisations, find funding somehow in order to help these people. Because what do you want? Do you want people who are going to do the opposite of that and elect more Mitch McConnells and Boris Johnsons? No. You want people who are actually going to get the job done. For example, in my country we have people on the backbenches. The backbenches are the people who are just normal MPs who are there to represent their own constituents and to vote on matters. The front bench is the cabinet. You want the people that are considered based in the backbenches who actually are willing to get things done, the front benches. But they're not going to get their chance if the people at the front are either removed or their incentives change. If we change their incentives, because a lot of these people don't really have an ideology to speak of as well as being sympathetic to the Marxists, you also have to change their incentives. They pick these people because it's better for them to do so for their own careers. Yes, it's manipulation. Yes, it's a bit Machiavellian, but honour has no place in this war, I'm afraid. And that's another thing that a lot of people need to get rid of. We are fighting a dishonourable foe. Or at least mostly a dishonourable foe. It's not fair to label the entire left-wing movement as dishonourable, because that's not the case. But most of them have no scruples about doing the dirty work, the Machiavellian things that are required to get the job done. Unfortunately, right-wingers are too honourable, they fight too fairly, and they assume that the opposite side will again and again do the honourable thing and fight fair and square. When of course we've had how many decades of them not doing so and stabbing you in the back, doing the things that they need to do to win? At what point is doing the same thing over and over again going to show itself as the madness it actually is to you guys before you realise that honour isn't going to work? Disregard honour, fight dirty, and you will win. Because these people are only doing so because they can get away with it. If you show that you can also fight dirty and you're not going to let them get away with their dirty tactics, well, maybe they will be less inclined to do so, or they will be beaten because you might find you yourselves might well be capable enough of doing so. And to continue the stuff on elections after that little aside, not only think about the people you want elected, think about the people who are going to elect them, or at least who you want to elect these people, because it seems to me in America at least, not so much in Britain, because we actually have urban areas that vote Conservative, not just Labour. You have to start thinking about urban areas and reclaiming them, because what I've seen in your recent elections for the past couple of decades is that urban areas have been pushing farther and farther towards the left and not to the right. Although there was a slight change this election because Trump did really well with minorities, apparently not so well with white men, surprisingly, but that's besides the point. You need to start thinking about how you're going to get places like Detroit, places like LA, New York, places like that to vote for you, because it's pretty clear that they're the major population centres, that's where most of the electoral seats will be, and you need to win them just to be sure that you're going to win that election. But it seems to me a lot of people have abandoned it. They don't care anymore. They think that it's just far gone. When, as we've seen in recent history, it's not impossible for a place like New York to have a Republican mayor. It's not impossible for California to have a Republican governor. We've seen places turn Republican over time, and other places turn blue over time. Nothing is set in stone. Things can change, which is why it's up to you guys to do the legwork in these areas to change them. You need to wake people up and make them realise just how bad the Democratic plantation actually is. It's going to take years, it might take decades, but you've got to do it, because the left have been doing so for the past 60 years. They've got a 60-year head start on you. What are you going to do? Are you just going to hope that the rural areas will vote you in? Because they're not. I saw the results of the last election, regardless if they were false or not. The whole point is this: the urban areas were surrounded by a sea of red, but it wasn't enough votes to get you over the edge to win anyway. You've got to think about that. You've got to think about not just the people who are already ideologically inclined, but the people who are not. Because you have a system where all legal adults can vote, which means even though you only need 10% of people to make change, you still need that 10% of people to actually incentivise the people who would otherwise vote blue to vote red. And that's something that you guys are probably going to have to figure out how to do yourselves in your own societies, because everybody's different, nowhere is equal, every situation is different. But that is one thing that we can all do in our own countries to work towards, going after the places that seem to be predominantly leftist and flipping them. And it's not impossible, because minds are fickle and minds change. Another thing to do, at least for those of us on the internet, for those of us who aren't really in any particular political party or work as political activists, because there are some of us on here who do, but they're in a much better position than we are. For those of us who aren't, either we join up with these people who work as activists, handing out leaflets and things like that, or we form our own particular groups, our own organisations, and we work together. We form networks, we form think tanks, we form blogs. It doesn't matter what you do, as long as you are out there performing activity that aids your cause, that is work being done that will harm the left. You need to start doing that. You can't just sit there on your ass and complain on Twitter all day. You actually have to get out there and do work. Whether it's mental work or physical work, it doesn't matter. Less moaning, more doing will help the cause immensely. And most people in the West live in societies where there are two parties, or even one party even, who dominate everything. What you need to do is either to somehow flip that, because it's not impossible for outside parties to win elections, especially if you're in proportional representation areas, and it's not so hard for another party that might be the second biggest to win their election. But, as I said before, you also have to change the politicians that you're voting for, or at least their incentives. So that means you may have to subvert the very parties that you vote for or don't want to vote for in order to win these elections. That could mean voting for the worst candidates on the opposite side, because maybe you're in America where there's open primaries, and that can guarantee your party's victory, because this is what the left apparently have done in America. They will vote in open primaries in the Republican sector in order to get the worst candidate to win. You can do that. Is it dishonourable? Yes. Is it illegal? No. Do it. Please do it, because if they do it, you can do it too. They've allowed this to happen. If you can't subvert the opposition, then you have to subvert your own side, because again, you've got people who are working against you, and that means putting your own people in there so that they can force those out. Like, for example, I don't know if this is what Carl Sargon of Akkad was trying to do in UKIP, but he created, or was trying to create, from what I could gather, a liberalist faction or caucus, for those of you in America, in UKIP. I think that kind of thing can work, but it has to be done in the biggest parties. So, unfortunately, hoping that small parties like UKIP or the Libertarian Party or the Liberal Party in Britain, for example, or the LP in America, the Libertarian Party, some magical reason push the opposition parties to go further libertarian in order to win elections is just not going to work. And I'll tell you why. Every party, at least in Britain, has a manifesto. And this is what they're going to do if they were to be elected. Now, as we all know, when UKIP were gaining ground against the Tories, they weren't exactly getting seats, but they were gaining votes, they were gaining traction. The Tories essentially stole the most important things from them, like Brexit, for example, in order to get elected in, I think it was either 2010 or 2015. Lo and behold, it worked. Stealing their programme, at least parts of it anyway, helped them gain votes to win against Labour in one election. I don't know which one it was. And what happened after that? They didn't do a goddamn thing other than Brexit. And even then, David Cameron was banking on Brexit losing. He didn't expect Brexit to actually happen. But still, they didn't do most, if any, of the stuff that they stole from UKIP, aside from Brexit. But even then, they were forced to because the people had willed it. You're only pushing them to win elections to save their own skins. You're not actually getting much change out of it. Yes, Brexit was a big change, but we were lucky that most people in the UK wanted it. Which is why you're better off subverting the actual party itself so that you're in charge, you can dictate what you want in that party, and if you happen to gain power, enact that change. That is actually the best way to do it. It's the longest way, it's the hardest way. You might not even win, you might fail a few times, but what's the alternative? Vote for the same people who aren't going to do what you want? And then we have to guard against certain things. In particular, we have to guard against distractions. For example, the transgender toilet debacle. That was never a debate, that was never an argument, that was never even a thing, it was never an issue. It was something that was purposefully designed by leftist activists in order to distract the right, so they would be constantly arguing not only with other leftists who were there to distract them, but also with themselves, the more libertarian right-wingers who were saying, oh whatever, who cares, it's just a bathroom, who cares, to the more conservative right-wingers who were arguing about what could happen in a bathroom with a trans person, like, who cares? That is not an issue. It never was an issue until they brought it up. And you fell for it hook, line and sinker. Notice that they always use things like that to distract you. Don't fall for them. However, because they do that to you, you can do that to them. And believe me, it's totally possible. Although they are not a major issue because they are a shadow of their former selves, you do have to be aware of some extremist elements, in particular the ones that always show up when a big issue happens. Now, I'm personally of the belief that they're sent in there purposefully by leftists, or at the very least, it's bait that attracts them set by leftists to distract not only us, but to paint us as them. So they'll put bait out there for people like Patriot's Alternative to run over to us to start moaning and groaning about the things they usually moan about, and then we get bogged down and start moaning against them and talking with them, and then we get grouped in with them. We have to watch out for that. Don't allow them to be anywhere near you. Don't allow them to be in your groups. Don't allow them to be in your protests even. You have to make sure that if they do turn up, they're politely but firmly asked to leave. Also, if they do start turning up on their own accord and start arguing with us, just ignore them because they're not relevant. I would also suggest that you pick your objectives well. So that means not arguing amongst yourselves about subjects or topics that aren't really relevant or seem to me lost causes, or at least at the moment, lost causes. You need to pick realistic targets, you need to go for them, and then move on to the next one. If you need to move with short-term targets first, then go to the mid-term, then the long-term targets, however we want to do it, as long as you achieve those objectives to the best of your ability, do it. Don't get bogged down in things that are pipe dreams. You have to deal with the realistic ones first. And here's another thing, and I will continually talk about this in videos until I finally see it start to die, and that is stop being overly emotional. Stop losing yourself when things go horribly wrong or when something happens and you get outraged. Remember, for years, we were the ones who were mocking the SJWs about being offended at everything, and they are offended at everything. They're still always offended at something. They always will be. It's their nature. But I have seen some people on the right, I think it's probably just the long fight is wearing them down. They're beginning to get a bit SJW in their emotional reactions. And you could see that the left were trying to coax that out of a lot of people during the election results. You know, with the whole copium thing. Now, it failed because they kept pressing cope, and there was no other joke. But they wouldn't have done that if there weren't people who were letting their guard down and letting the leftists think that that could be taken advantage of. It's important that you don't give them any reason to start trying to twist our own memes against us. And that means being emotionally strong, be stoic if you need to be, don't panic, don't think that everything's suddenly failed and you have to give up because this one thing has been defeated or this one thing has ended, be it a right or a law or a politician winning or losing. It doesn't matter because at the end of the day, you're still alive, your party is still alive, that other politician is still alive, depending on how old they are, that is, they can still go for another hurrah. There is no end to this, because that is politics. Remember, there's always the next 4 years, the next 10 years, the next 20 years to get it right. Don't get blackpilled. Don't spread that negativity with the aim of stopping people from doing what they want to do in regards to the culture war, because not only does it defeat the point of being in it in the first place, I have to ask, why are you people still considering yourselves on our side if you're trying to stop us from saving our own countries or our own states? Why do you feel such compunction to do so? It just makes me think. Other than that, I will also encourage you guys to talk to normies and everybody you possibly can. The more people that talk about these issues and talk about these ideas, the more we'll convince people. Whether or not they're convinced themselves, but then talk to another person who is then convinced, and then they talk to a person who is convinced. It doesn't matter. The more people talking, the better. So anyway, the video's been going on for a long time now. I think I'll end it there. I'll see you all next time.